Alright, we're talking about the internal components now on the water recovery system. So on the side with the hose hookups down here, the drain connection box down here, we're just going to talk about two components. Right here we have the switch connector for the liquid level switch. So whenever you need to switch that out, just going to pull those two screws up and you'll be able to replace everything from this side of the connector over on down to the liquid level switch. Down there, the brass check valve down there, that is the fill check valve. So that is connected to the cam and groove fitting on the front right here. So whenever you're filling this up, that allows us to not have water flowing back out when you remove the cam and groove fitting. So that's the fill check valve. Always, when you're replacing it, there's a small little arrow, but the direction of the arrow is in towards the water recovery system. So you'll notice it's facing from there to there. It's kind of hard to see. Alright, so now we're talking about the left side of the water recovery system. So the first component we're going to talk about is the EDUCTOR check valve, actually. The EDUCTOR check valve. So right here you have the vacuum exhaust from sterilizer. That's where that hose connects. So anytime the water recovery system is pulling a vacuum on the chamber, all that steam and air and condensate is going through there, through this check valve, and then into the EDUCTOR. So this check valve, its function is whenever the chamber is under vacuum, say you're performing a vacuum leak test, or if you're in a vacuum pulse on the conditioning phase, you don't want to pull all that water back through into the chamber. So this check valve prevents backflow into the chamber. So a very important valve for vacuum, and this does hold vacuum on a vacuum leak test. Right here behind this bracket, we have the EDUCTOR. And the EDUCTOR is what is creating the vacuum in the water recovery system. So this hose is, we got water rushing through that hose through the EDUCTOR. And it's going through a little nozzle that's creating the low pressure and creating the vacuum on this bottom side. So on this side you have the outlet that's flowing back into the tank. So again, we have water rushing through this from the pump. You know, the pump is pumping water through the EDUCTOR, and it's creating the low pressure here, which is creating the vacuum that pulls on the chamber of the sterilizer main unit. So it's kind of a Venturi effect. You know, there's a little nozzle, and as that water sprays there at high velocity, it's creating the low pressure on the bottom side of the EDUCTOR. So that's the EDUCTOR, and it's just mounted by 4 nuts here and some U-bolts on the back, and these large hoses right here, just some 3/4 inch swage lock fittings. Next up is the drain check valve down here. This is a swing check valve, and it's mounted vertically to allow this tank to drain more easily. So when you drain this tank, the gate is swung open to allow water to flow out very easily. Now when the water recovery system is on and the pump is running, it closes that gate and allows, you know, water not to pump back up into the tank. So that is the drain check valve. It's a brass valve, and to replace it, again, it's just going to be 2 swage lock fittings, one on the bottom and one on the top. Next, we got 2 valves. So we have the water fill valve right here. So anytime you press the toggle switch on the other side of the water recovery system, this valve opens and allows water to come through, out the pump, through the valve, along this hose, and then out right here, recovered water to sterilizer out, the blue hose. So again, anytime you press that toggle switch, it activates a relay, opens up this valve, and allows you to pump water to the sterilizer. Also, when you activate that toggle switch, you are closing the water circulation valve. So this valve right here, which is a little different, it's a kind of different design, it's a bellows valve, and it is normally open. So when it's de-energized, it's open, which allows water to flow through it and circulate. So here's the outlet, here's the inlet coming out from the pump. So when the water recovery system is just running throughout a cycle, water is just circulating through here, going through the heat exchanger and cooling it off. And anytime you pump up water to the sterilizer main unit, this valve closes. Now we're talking about the front of the water recovery system. Again, there's all the valves that we just talked about right here coming out of the pump. So right here is the pump. We got the pump body, we got the petcock at the bottom to drain it. You can open that to drain out any water that remains down in the pump body before shipment. We have the inlet to the pump. This hose connects to the bottom of the water tank. So that's the inlet, and of course the outlet going to this cross. Right here, we got the motor, nameplate if you need any of that information off it. Got the mounting bolts down here that mount it to the base plate. And the wiring is actually on the back side of it, so you can't really see it from this angle. Right here we have the liquid level switch. So this is an MPT fitting, and so you can remove it with a crescent wrench if you ever have to replace it. The liquid level switch protects the motor and pump from running dry. So this water level ever drops too low, the liquid level switch will prevent the motor from turning the pump. And you can kind of see the wiring kind of routes along the hose right here and goes over to a connector and then is wired into the electrical box on top. Finally, we have the water tank. So these water tanks, excuse me, we actually weld these in-house and we leak test them. So you should never have any problems with them, but you can kind of check for leaks along the seams, where the couplings are, any of the couplings. These are not meant to hold pressure, so never blow them out with compressed air. There are two vents on top that will prohibit these things from pressurizing or a vacuum forming. But again, never blow these out with compressed air. And now we're talking about the back of the water recovery system. We're going to go through some of these components. So right here we have the heat exchanger. All these fins on top are aluminum fins, so they're kind of delicate. So if you're ever cleaning this out or removing this, just be careful of those. All the tubes are copper tubes, but this is actually pretty vulnerable to being bent. So if you're ever working on this heat exchanger, remember to counter torque and be careful with it. Right below it we have the heat exchanger fan. We have the incoming power here, and you can follow that back up to the electrical box. This fan draws air across the heat exchanger, down and then out. So a good check is if you put your hand right here, you can feel air coming out if it's on. Be careful not to put your fingers up there. If it's on, there's fan blades moving right there. This whole assembly actually can be removed by 4 mounting bolts and then removing the 2 hoses that connect to it, and this just slides out. Right here we have the steam trap check valve. So here's the steam trap right here, and whenever condensate is forming in the chamber of the sterilizer main unit, It's going through the steam trap, through this hose, through this check valve, and back into the tank. So this is where we are recovering all the condensate formed during a sterilizer cycle. So this is why this unit is called a water recovery system, because we're recovering the water throughout a cycle. So this check valve is very important because if, say, a vacuum is formed in the chamber, this prohibits water being sucked back into the chamber through this valve. Also, this is a stop, a backflow prevention during vacuum leak tests. This check valve seals off so there's no vacuum leaks back to the chamber. So the steam trap is very important to the sterilizer operation. What happens is when steam hits it, it expands the bellows and it seals off. So it allows the chamber to keep pressure. When condensation flows down out of the chamber and hits the steam trap, it cools those bellows off and allows them to open, and it allows the condensation to flow through back into the water tank. So whenever you hear some chattering, a little bit of noise throughout a cycle, that's the steam trap opening and closing and letting condensation through and then sealing back up when the steam hits it. So that's the steam trap. Lastly, we're going to talk about the top of the water recovery system. So on the far left, we have the bleach port plug. So whenever you're doing the disinfecting clean, you're going to remove that cap, and that's where you're going to pour the bleach in for the disinfecting clean. Now here in the electrical box, here's all the electronics controlling the water recovery system. So we have a K1, K2, K3, and K4 relays. And these all work in conjunction to turn the pump on and off, whether you're pressing the toggle switch or the sterilizer main unit is telling the water recovery system to turn on. So these all work together to turn the pump on and off, and then also to open the fill and recirculation valve. Right here is a little snubber that protects the liquid level switch. So it's kind of protecting it from any voltage spikes. Right here we have the two check valves I previously mentioned. This one is protecting from vacuum. Again, we don't want any vacuum or pressure to form in this tank. Low pressure is okay, but this allows air to be sucked in and relieve any vacuum that might form. This allows any pressure to escape, so pressure doesn't form in this tank. Because again, this tank was designed just to hold the water and not to hold pressure. And that's it for the top. Alright, if you ever have to replace any of the components on the control panel, on the top we have the toggle switch, and it is actually held into this panel with some clips. So you can squeeze those clips to remove that. All you have to do is remove these two little spade connectors. The on and off switch right here is actually held in by two Phillips head screws on the other side, on the operator side of the panel. So you remove those two screws, you can remove these two spade connectors and pull it right out. When you're working on any of this, again, always have the power off, because you would have 120 on these terminals. So have it disconnected and have the power off. Right here is the power connector that goes to the sterilizer main unit. This is mounted with 4 Phillips head screws on the operator side of the panel. Those can be removed. And this cable is routed up to the electrical box on the top. So if you ever have to disconnect this, you can follow this up through the cord grip. It's in cord grip number 2, and you can remove it out of the electrical panel. Down here is just a little cord grip that you can loosen to remove all the wires off of the control panel. And that's it for the water recovery system internal components.